Welcome to this Payments Unpacked podcast. Today I'm so pleased to be joined by Zhenya Winter and Fred Viard from Bottomline. Now, today's podcast is all about standards and specifically going ISO 20022 native in Swift. So if you didn't already know, Swift have adopted ISO 20022 as an open global standard for their financial messages. ISO 20022 provides consistent, rich and structured data that can be used for every kind of financial business transaction. And bridging the gap between the old and the new formats, Swift started an ISO 20022 coexistence period in March 2023, and that coexistence period runs right the way through to November 2025. However, major market infrastructure such as Target, CHAPS for the Bank of England and MEPS in Singapore have already moved over to ISO 20022 for message processing. So with such a transformational undertaking right at the centre and the core of Swift, I'm pleased to be joined today by two ISO 20022 experts from Bottomline. Let's introduce them. Zhenya, let's start with you. Give us a quick who am I and who are Bottomline, please.
Yeah, of course. Thanks very much, Mike. My name's Zhenya Winter. I'm head of global marketing for financial messaging at Bottomline. Sort of my role is to drive the strategy and also develop thought leadership for our customers to support them in their very, very busy roadmaps. So I'm delighted to be here, and financial messaging, Bottomline is a global business payments business, but our part that Fred and I represent, financial messaging, it's all around that connectivity, that orchestration, that messaging. So hence we're here today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Zhenya. And Fred, a quick who am I from you, please.
Yes, sure. So thank you, Mike, and hello, everyone. So I'm Frederic. I'm based in Switzerland, working in this financial messaging space for a bit more than 20 years. So I went through multiple changes, moving from X25 as a protocol to IP, introducing FileAct, moving to MX, to ISO 15022 in the security space. So it is one change again in terms of format, and I'm working from the product side and the market side as well. So happy to deal with this interesting question, which is ISO 20022.
Fantastic. As you can see, we've got some fantastic guests with us today. And that's because it's such an important change in the world of financial messaging. So with these two experts in their field, let's jump in with some questions. And Zhenya, I'm going to start with you because recently I joined you at a seminar and you asked the crowd that had attended that day where they were in their ISO journey. The question you asked was, were they at a connectivity only status? Were they market ready? Or were they fully ISO 20022 native? And by show of hands, we saw that only 3 people said that they were ISO 20022 native. And that was out of 60 people in the room. So it's not a surprise that my question to you this morning is, how ready are banks and FIs for the end of the coexistence period?
Yeah, it's a good question. And out of those 3 of 60, there were represented 2 institutions. So 2 said yes from the same bank. I think the key is the fact that that was an Association of Foreign Banks event. I think that does make a difference if you are an agency bank. I was surprised, but I had been hearing a lot of feedback from customers that I was speaking to. And they were being told, by their correspondent banks, hey, relax, don't worry about it too much. I also think the ISO deadline has moved previously. And I think there are a lot of hopeful people out there that are thinking that November 2025, isn't a true date. Well, I'm here to tell you that you're wrong. In March 2024, so not that long ago, the Swift board had a meeting and they confirmed that it is November 2025. That date's not shifting. Let me just give you some quick stats. So in December 2023, the amount of Swift cross-border traffic was 19%. And then when we asked Swift for another figure for that webinar in April, that event in April, it'd risen to 20.3%. Now, that actually isn't a very high increase, isn't a big increase. So I think And when I spoke to Swift, they themselves said they were a bit disappointed, but there were lots of initiatives that they were taking, lots of different kind of membership bodies, lots of different advisory conversations they were setting up to find out what they needed to do to push that further. If you put it in the context of those figures globally, we did a webinar, and this was for over 500 people. In APAC, 31% said they were ISO native, and globally, the rest of the world, it was 28%. So they're slightly higher figures, but I think there's more that can be done in terms of understanding what the process is to be ISO native. I think when you speak to behemoths like HSBC and BNP Paribas, they have the same issues as the slightly smaller regional banks like East West Bank when we speak to them. And they've all underestimated the importance of testing. No matter how worried you are, you can never underestimate how much testing is needed. And also, I think they underestimated what they needed to do as a project. It isn't an IT project. It isn't an operations project. It needs to be rolled out across the whole financial institution, especially those that are customer facing. So I think the project's been underestimated, and we're going to talk about the barriers to adoption potentially later on. But more needs to be done, and just with all the testing, you need to get cracking now. You haven't got time.
Yes, so Zhenya, I agree with you. I think it has been a bit underestimated in terms of the ramification. So, because any system which is part of the chain has to be upgraded. So first you have to identify which systems are legacy, which one are able to support ISO but by being upgraded, because it's huge. So we discussed recently with a big universal bank, and they said that they had hundreds of systems to accommodate to ISO 20022. So it's a big task, and maybe the scope of ISO 20022 has been a bit underestimated, because it goes in any system: reconciliation, sanction screening, reporting, everything has to be upgraded. So I believe this is one of the points, so that the industry is starting to really understand how deep ISO 20022 will impact their ecosystems globally.
Fantastic. Fred, you've just given us an idea of the scale of the challenge, and Zhenya, you've given us a real rousing call to action in terms of the need to do something before we get to the end of a coexistence period. But Zhenya, you also mentioned correspondent banks, and Fred, I started banking as a correspondent banker, so that's where I sort of cut my teeth in payments. So my question to you, Fred, is, are the correspondent banks doing enough to help their banks in this migration transformation?
I believe so, but I believe also, so the ISO 20022 stats that Zhenya mentioned is about cross-border payments, because when we look at the banks who are already doing ISO 20022 in the context of RTGS, domestic payment, they are much more. But in the level of cross-border, the ratio is quite low. But I think at the end of the day, it's really the responsibility of each player to move to ISO. I believe the correspondent bank, they are doing enough. They are maintaining multiple rails, because they have to accommodate some proprietary format, some MT format, and some MX format. So I think that they are fine, they are ready, and they are explaining what to do to continue the ISO 20022 chain. But I think, again, so it's really the responsibility of each player to move to ISO in order to ensure the end-to-end frictionless payment, which should come with ISO 20022.
I think when I asked that question to one of our speakers from HSBC, they were very clear that they have been very active in terms of educating their customers, or their corporate customers in particular, about the benefits of ISO. But then he did accept that other correspondent banks out there, perhaps within the context of a busy roadmap, didn't maybe prioritize it as much as they should, but they're realizing that it's all about education, and so they need to get, they are starting to do that now, even the smaller regional banks that I talked about. So more to be done, but they have started for sure.
Good. So I get your response that, correspondents have a role, but there was an underlying comment there from Fred in terms of whoever you are, if you're in this space, don't rely on somebody else to do something. You've got to get in and understand what this means for you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just widen that. Sorry, go for it.
you can control what you will send, but you need to make sure that what about what you will receive. So this is part of that. So if you want to be ready on ISO, it's not only being able to send something in ISO, it's also about being able to have multiple use cases of what you will receive. So this is the reason why it's really everyone has to be part of this change, because this is not only about sending, but it's also about receiving. So if we want to have something which is frictionless both sides, we need to have everyone onboarding onto ISO 20022.
Yeah, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. The whole nature of ISO is it's all about standardization, interoperability, ubiquity. And that doesn't work if everybody's not on the same page. The whole system falls down. So, yeah.
You're making it sound like Alexander Graham Bell on the telephone. If I've got a telephone, so
Yeah, I
what if
can't
nobody
ring
else has got
anybody.
one?
No good. No good. And that's right. It's all about, and we love, in marketing, we love alliteration, right? So it's all about cooperation, coexistence, collaboration. And it is all about the industry working as a whole to promote ISO 20022, not just the benefits, but also solving for some of these pain points. And I want to just cover those. So when we said, what are the barriers for you? What are you finding so difficult about implementing ISO? 41% said it was being able to support additional data and structure. Only 6% said that it was the business case. They accept the fact that there are reasons to do ISO, so we've been successful there. 12% said it was counterparty acceptance, and the majority, particularly in APAC at 52%, says it was end-to-end processing chain readiness. So those are things that the industry, Swift, people like Fred, those trusted third-party providers, this is what we should be doing to help solve those pain points. They've told us what the issues are. It's up to us to turn around and address them.
Really helpful. And you've, in those examples, you said it's not just about the business case. And, when you've got a mandatory change in a global Swift communication network, you can't sort of say the business case says no, because you're either in or out of Swift, whether you do it. But the question I've got for Fred here is, look, I know I've got to do this by 2025, but is there a business case to transitioning to ISO 20022 native before 2025? Do I just hang in there and get in at the end, or is there a business case just to get on with it and do it now?
So I believe so. Today, any new initiatives is built on ISO 20022. So not only for payment, but also it's in the securities space, even if there is no deadline. So there is any new initiatives in ISO 20022. So I believe that there will be the need. So can you repeat just the questions, please?
Yeah, but what I was saying was, I sort of understand whatever the business case says, I've got to do this because if I want to stay in Swift, because it's mandatory, I could just hang in there and do things at the last minute. Or is there a case for transitioning to an ISO 20022 native status before 2025? Should I just get on with it?
Yes. So any new initiative is on ISO 20022, whatever we talk about payments or whatever we talk about securities. But we see that, for instance, any new RTGS, most of the RTGS are moving to ISO 20022, whatever it is in the UK, in Europe, in Switzerland, in Asia. So this is something that helps starting to build the business case around ISO 20022, but for domestic needs. And then it has to be expanded to cross-border with the Swift CBPR Plus initiatives. But there is some initiatives in RTGS, but also in instant payment. So if you look at SEPA in Europe, or CKIP in Switzerland, or wherever it is, any new instant payment initiative is based on ISO 20022. So this format, this ISO 20022 format, will become the common language for any type of payment, whatever it is, domestic RTGS or instant payments or cross-border. So this is really the universal language that will be put in place to ensure that there is less friction in the payment, less exceptions, because the format is end-to-end machine readable. This is really a key aspect of ISO 20022. You can, this this language is something that has to be read by systems to avoid any manual interventions, to ease operation, to ease tracking, to ease exception solving, all of that. So the business case around ISO 20022 is multiple. It's for cross-border in the context of CBPR Plus, yes, but any new initiative, instant RTGS, are on ISO, and more globally, to have something which is frictionless and with less exception and easier exception to manage. So operational efficiency in brief, it's something that will require to have ISO 20022 being in place.
So I think I hear from you, it's wider than just the business case. You know, if you're playing in this field, you just need to get on with it, whether it's domestically or regionally or globally. You've got to get to that ISO native status to be able to continue to participate and realise the benefits. And as we get that ubiquity, Zhenya, what else might it give me? You know, whether it's a business case or a use case or a benefit that I can leverage, apart from being compliant.
Yeah.
What else can I get from this new ISO status that I'll achieve?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a certain argument for generally we don't know what all the use cases are at the moment. You've got to be in it. You've got to be ISO native to start exploring all of them. But let's cover a few. So I was at a conference the other day with FICO, and they were talking about hyper-personalization, and they were talking about the importance of data, not only to sort of get rid of attrition rates, but also in terms of building potential for, you know, upsell, cross-sell within the bank solutions. So, you know, it's the key. The key is that rich, structured, standardized data. So the more data you have, the more information you've got potentially on customers, the more you can personalize things. And then obviously we're going to go into the fraud, the benefits for fraud in terms of, Fred talked about reducing friction within payments. And we all know the use case around Bar Cuba, right? That now will be, that payment will go through and it won't be disrupted because we can see from the field. And then generally, you know, what corporates care about, yes, they want access to real-time payment rails, which are all ISO. But also, the second most important thing is about cash visibility. And they need to be able to, especially in the world of real-time, they've got to be able to work out how much money to, 24/7, how much money to keep back, how much money to invest. And so again, it's about that data. It's being able to use the data that ISO produces to predict those patterns about when you're going to have cash flow. And then I've talked about reducing friction cross-border. It is one of the most important things. People still say the biggest issue with cross-border payments is lack of transparency or unknown speed of arrival. And these can all be solved with ISO. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about, I don't think you can talk about ISO without tying it into other things to help, particularly within cross-border. So once you have ISO tied in with customer case management, tied in with pre-verification, then that is the kind of triumvirate for what is going to not only improve cross-border payments, but domestic payments. So there's lots of use cases there. It's about the data, Mike.
I agree with you, Zhenya. And then, as you say, so many other new overlay services, such as Swift GPI and many others coming along the road, will require to have this rich data for allowing better monitoring, better tracking, a better operational efficiency, a better reporting as well by using the richer data. And at the end of the day, all of that will benefit to the end customer. So more speed, more transparency, more notification, more visibility. So all of that requires to have a standard language which is rich enough to build all these overlay services and added value features that will benefit to the end customer at the end of the day.
Fantastic. Look, we've had the ISO passion, we've had the timeline imperative, we've had the ideas on use case and business case and leveraging the new technology. There is another side to that story. If I'm a bank here in Europe or in APAC somewhere, or maybe in America, I'm being told I've got to move. It's another project in a whole host of things that I need to do. Fred, just give us a couple of points on the main pain points you're hearing from Bottomline's customers. What are the issues? They're saying, well, I know I've got to do it, But what pain points?
So I believe that there are a few pain points, of course. So one of them is to, as I mentioned before, is about upgrading the legacy system. So first to identify all the systems that are impacted by ISO 20022, and then to make the upgrade of all of them. Because even if the banks have already moved to ISO for instance, domestic payment, usually they have different systems and different teams managing cross-border payments, so they have to really look at the full chain inside the bank to identify all the systems which are impacted. So this is one of the big pain points. Also, they have to understand, of course, the ramification and to tell that at the executive level. So it's not an IT project, as Zhenya said. This is not an operational. It is really a revisit of all the systems. So it has to be, let's say, approach at the executive level because it implies compliance, corporate banking, everything which is related to ISO. And also the cost, because moving all these systems to ISO 20022 has a cost. So they need to book budget for that and to make sure that they will allocate the money where it has to be where it has to be put in order to upgrade all the system. So I think it's all of that comes in a busy agenda, and then this is something that they have to address, and they have also some more detailed technical issue to deal with. For instance, there is some different processing around the ACK, NAC coming from the network, how to route them, the management of also some dialects of ISO 20022 between banks and between regions. So all of that has to be dealt by the banks. And finally, something which is not so light, I would say, is the experience of the operational people in the banks who are really used to read empty messages, so that they knows the empty messages by heart. So they have to learn a new language to identify where the information sits into the message, in which field, for which occurrence, and so on. So there are many pain points that have to be addressed, and this is probably what has been a bit underestimated. So, it's a new release of Swift. No. It's a new language, all systems. You need to understand how to read that, what are the impact on the system and all of that, and to plan that in a way that you can be ready on time. So it's a big project.
I think that's right, Fred. It's a big project and underestimated. But, I mean, ISO 20022, right, it's not new. It's been a global business standard for a long time. So I think people thought, well, yeah, it's been around a while. It can't be that complex. But guess what it is? And, Fred's talking about, lack of resource and cost. But essentially, ISO 20022 is designed to improve operational efficiency. So it might cost you a lot up front, potentially, but having ISO, and this is why you should move to, you're going to have to do it anyway. You asked Fred before, what's the argument for doing it now and not waiting till 2025? Well, so that you can take advantage of that operational efficiency. So you can exceed your customer expectations, give them a better customer experience. So you can get rid of the friction and false positives within the payments that you do, so that you can easily get an end-to-end view of everything that's going on in the bank and get rid of silos. This is all the benefits of ISO. And so, yes, it's costly up front, but it's going to be a good news in the long run.
Fantastic. And having looked at the pain points, I just want to look at one of the positives of ISO 20022. I started off, as I said, in correspondent banking. There was, in the MT100 series, there was the MT100. That was it. STP meant straight through to printer. And also, if we were having to find on the piece of paper field 72 for, I don't know, was it additional information? We were looking at another field as where cover was. It was all manually from a piece of paper and re-input. One of the things I can see from ISO 20022 and the structure is it gives us an opportunity to use that enhanced data and those structure fields. How important is that going to be in really realizing the benefits of ISO 20022 within Swift? Perhaps ask Fred to try and bring out some of those, the importance of use of enhanced and structured fields.
So so for sure the enhanced data, the richer data will help in many areas. So we mentioned reporting, exception management, more accurate information, so you know where to look for some information. So it's precise, it's structured, so you have less less room for free text, and you have no room for free text and these kind of things, and it will help to have better structured information. But you will have also some additional information. So the LEI, for instance, which is the legal entity identifier, that will help to have more operational efficiency, to monitor better the messages, to, let's say, to control a bit more the information. So it's really something which will help in many areas to have more informations that you can reuse across some systems, so you can extract some blocks and to pass them into another system. You can look really inside the message where you would like to look inside the message. So it is really something that will help to have richer information for more precision, more notification, more interoperability across systems, because we have to keep in mind that some systems at the domestic level have already moved to ISO 20022, so such as RTGS. So if you want to have end-to-end ISO message processing, you need to share the same language, because at the end of the day, cross-border payment will end its life in our RTGS system. So you need to have the full chain. So ISO is really the original block for making something which is at the global level, let's say, I would say, seamless and frictionless. And we see that within the G20 target, which is to move to ISO 20022, because it will be only, I would say, a common language across the planet that will help to have payment being frictionless at both cross-border and domestic level.
So ISO 20022, the Esperanto of payment messages and standards.
Something like that, yes.
Let's pick up on another benefit, and almost every week we see some piece of information new about Swift and ISO, and we saw recently on FinExtra a report that Swift was opening up an API channel for ISO 20022 in respect to corporate payment tracking, and I often hear this as one of the benefits of ISO 20022. So Zhenya, how will this tracking service support payment status, transparency, and help with confirmation of receipt?
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I always try and ask Swift, what are you doing about corporate customers? Is it going to be made compulsory for them? Are they going to get a mandate? And Swift always say, no. But we've got lots of different projects that we're working on, and now I know what one of those projects is. So that article, just to recap. So Swift's working with 25 leading cash management banks and 20 corporates to basically provide a standardized messaging service based around ISO 20022. And it's to get rid of a lot of these corporates are multi-banked. So they're getting lots of different messages, lots of different formats, and it's confusing. And so they're saying, let's make it a unified way for the corporates to receive transactions. And also it gets rid of that jeopardy in terms of geography, levels of investments. It's saying this is a standardized way to receive that messaging or that transaction. So therefore, we're kind of leveling the playing field no matter what type of corporate you are. It's not just that initiative. Can I also mention another one that I was swatting up on before this call? So I also saw that they've got a pilot that's going live in June. That's going live in June 2024, which is about corporate to bank flows. And they seem to be saying that it's only a pilot program just now, but they're going to extend that to all SCORE participants via Fin Plus at the end of 2024. So there's a lot of corporate activities that are happening. But I think, Fred, probably in terms of the detail, you're more of an expert around that than I am. So I'm going to pass some of that question over to Fred to expand on it, if I may.
Yeah, please do. And Fred, I'm interested in your view as well around mandate. From a corporate, do you think Swift will end up mandating for corporates, or do you think the benefits will be overwhelmingly useful for corporates and therefore they'll come running into the embrace of ISO 20022?
I believe the second, because this is a different relationship now. So the banks has a direct relationship with the corporate compared to the bank who has a direct relationship with Swift. So I believe that there is no obligation for now, and I believe it will be market driven. So the big, let's say, cash management banks, they are maintaining multiple rails. So we can expect at one point that they will incentivize or disincentivize the use of one or the other format. And I would say also that any new initiatives, any new information will be in ISO 20022. So if you want to keep up with the new informations, with the various benefits that you can take from richer data, will drive adoption, but from a market-driven perspective, at least for now, and not at the mandatory level. I believe at the end of the day, you need to have this end-to-end processing in the same language, so it should be quite logical to see this link between the corporate and the banks moving to ISO 20022. But again, I think it will be driven mainly by the correspondent bank and cash management banks to drive adoption with incentive, disincentive, but we also need to make sure that the systems at the corporate level, such as the ERP, are ready to support ISO messages as well. So there is another round of upgrade, which is at the ERP level and not just at the, let's say, the back office system level. So yeah, I believe it will be market driven in many cases, but for the corporate, if they can have one single language, whatever it is, ISO 20022 for instance, it will help them to have multi-bank connectivity and to have one single language with all of them. So this was the purpose of Swift at the beginning. By opening Swift to corporate, is to have one single pipe for multiple banks, and now it's one single pipe with one single format for multiple banks. So I think the market will move slightly towards ISO 20022 between corporates and banks, but again, probably much more market driven than regulatory driven.
Everything's market driven. That's why everybody's interested in real time. That's why we're moving towards digital banking. It's what the customer is front and center. And it's particularly important actually for Fred and I, because I talked about Bottomline, we work with banks and FIs, right? But Bottomline as a whole also deals with corporate customers. And so it's really important for us to be able to get that full 360 view. So often, as part of the thought leadership and the support that we offer, we say to the banks, this is what your corporate customers are asking from you. These are the pain points that they want you to solve. And a lot of those pain points, as I said, can be solved with ISO. And then it's going back to the corporates and saying, do you know what? We understand what your pain points are. This is what you should be asking your bank for to make sure that you're getting the service that you deserve. So it's that 360 view of what the corporate customer wants and should ask for the bank, and what the bank needs to prioritize in providing to the corporate. And that needs to be seen as a whole piece. You can't deal with those separately. The market demand, putting customers first, and that is a secret to competitive advantage.
Really, really useful insights, Frederick and Zhenya. There was a terrible phrase a few years ago in UK political circles around "we're all in this together." That hasn't stood the test of time. But if you think about ISO 20022 and the global payments community, we really are all in this together. So actually working together, helping each other, educating each other, both to get to an ISO native status is really important, but also to explore and exploit the benefits of the functionality that it provides. Fred, I'm going to ask you a question about this coexistence timeframe, because when announced, sometimes coexistent timeframes or the lead up to a particular event, it seems like ages away, and then very quickly you burn the time. And a few days ago, Swift published an update to the MT and MX coexistent timelines. So, on the basis that we heard from Zhenya earlier on that this day is fine, it's not going to change, this is it. Fred, could you just give us a bit of an update on the latest news from Swift around that coexistence timeframe?
So yes, you're right. So there are a few new news, I would say, showing that it requires a bit more time for this industry to onboard on ISO, for all the message being in scope. So the news is that there will be a focus on payment initiation, that will have to be on ISO in November 25. So these dates remain, but they open the door for having some continuity of existing message, but with disincentive and additional charges, meaning, and additional validation as well. Because what they would like to avoid, since we look at the global picture, we have these domestic payments and cross-border, but there is a link between the two. So if we want to reach the goal of the G20 and everything, we need to have something which is ISO 20022 end-to-end, or at least for some information, which are required to not lose significant information within the translation. And for that, so there will be some disincentive if you go after 25 for payment initiation, so charges, and also additional validations to ensure that even if you translate, you don't lose significant information. So I don't know how long it will remain, and does it mean that the inflow translation tool from Swift will remain? I don't know, but this is what it is suggested. So there will be a kind of grace period, but at a higher cost and with more validation. So meaning that you will need to have your messages being a bit richer than how they are today. But again, it has to be really look at the Swift Lite. So Swift is communicating around that. They have organized webinars. They are sending information to their customers. So look at that to really have the information, because some messages will be removed, such as the MT102, for instance. For other non-instruction messages, so such as reporting, statements, and exceptions, so they will remain a bit longer, but they will be deprecated. So meaning that they will not be enhanced and not neither be maintained. So it means that you can still use them after November 25, but there is no plan to upgrade this system. And moving along the road, these messages will also have a disincentive with a higher cost. So we don't know exactly until when this statement message and reporting will continue, but there will be some continuity within these messages, but no upgrade, no maintenance, and then higher cost moving ahead. And for exception and investigation, they would like to expand that until 26. So in essence, payment instructions, there is still the deadline. It seems, again, to be confirmed by Swift Direct, it seems that there will be an extension of that, but at a higher cost and higher criteria for validation. And for statements, no deprecated, so meaning no upgrade of them, higher cost in the future. And for exceptional investigation, so we wait for their service, one of their essential service about case management. So again, so look at what Swift is telling to have the details, because they have table of correspondence and all of that. But in essence, this is my understanding.
They've got, I've got a couple of links that Swift sent over to me with more information on and what Fred's just talked about. So I'm happy to share those with you, Mike, for your for your readers. I've got mixed feelings about it. As I said, you know, the aim is for everybody to be on ISO 20022. So it feels a bit like a kind of middle ground. You know, no, we're going to stick to November 2025 and we're rigid on that. But at the same time, we're going to let a few things slide.
And I think we have also to take care, because the big banks who have massively invested in ISO 20022 with all the system and things like that, they will probably also be a bit fed up to maintain multiple rail for some players. So they could also envisage to move their correspondent banking change to make sure to ease their operation and to not have to maintain ISO 20022 and MT rails for a long time. So I think at the end of the day, there will be a move towards, okay, fine, it costs me much more money because there will be disincentive. I have less traction from some correspondence. So at the end of the day, I think everyone will have to move.
I think there needs to be a really specific, and maybe there is, but there needs to be clear kind of cut-off time, because it can't be, you know, from what you've said, Fred, and I agree, this can't be happening for the next 4 or 5 years. You know, we're giving you a bit more time, but only a bit more time. That's how it should be, in my view.
So interesting perspectives there from Fred and Zhenya. You know, I think as you know, we'll need to look at Swift's website to see how this plays out. I'm sure Bottomline will be communicating with your customers and the market in terms of how this thing plays out. But I don't think any of this detracts from the need to get with the program, become ISO 20022 native, for the good of your customers, for the good of your business, but also to make sure that you meet the mandatory requirements of Swift going forward. Well, we've reached the end of our time together. A huge thanks to you, Zhenya and Fred, from Bottomline in helping us unpack the conversation in terms of how a bank might be on a journey to going ISO 20022 native. So huge thanks to you two, and also to the listeners. Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast. And while you're at it, please subscribe to the Payments Unpacked newsletter at payments-unpacked.com.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you. Bye bye.